Another video. I finally figured out where that whine is coming from. Can you hear that noise? In one of the previous videos dealing with my coolant lines, I took belts off. I tried to isolate that sound. I thought it was the water pump because my water pump did have a sound as if there was a bearing that was starting to show signs of wear and tear. So I'm really happy. I got a new water pump on the van, new fluid coupling, changed out all my coolant lines, but the sound persisted after putting all that back together. So I found a guy in Asheville, Tony's Alternator Service. He's familiar with our vans, and he was telling me it's like because of the age, there's some maintenance things. I really need to get the alternator to him so he can change out the brushes and contacts and some other things I don't really know that very much about. So I'm going to pull the alternator today. I've been on ToyotaVanTech.com and did my research and found out that it's really not a huge deal to pull the alternator, but I'm going to go ahead and film this process, so if any of you guys have a similar situation, then you can just jump into it and not have a big deal. So enjoy this little ride, changing out the alternator. All right, so with the fan shroud in place and the coolant reservoir in place, this looks like a really tough thing to get at. But according to the information, I can pull the reservoir tank. It'll make it a lot easier. Very first thing you gotta do, disconnect your battery. If you don't do that, I'm not responsible for what's gonna happen. So disconnect your battery before you touch anything having to do with the alternator. I don't wanna learn what that's gonna do, neither do you. Disconnect the battery. The alternator sits right down in here, underneath your power steering pump. Fan shroud's in the way. This I would pull if I had my other panel off. So if this other panel in here were removed, I would get everything the heck out of the way and make this really nice and easy. So anybody who's got the time, do it the easy way. Take everything out of your way and just kind of make it where you can get to everything easily, because this is going to be a little bit of a wrestle getting the alternator out and up and out of this hole. The reservoir can come off, and this was a mystery. Little side note, could not figure out how this thing was attached. There's no bolts. I thought it was almost like a permanent installation, which makes no sense at all. Then upon closer inspection, I realized this actually slides down into this metal bracket. It's just sitting there by gravity because it's got a little slot that this metal bracket slides into. So you're going to disconnect the level sensor for the reservoir itself right there. You can take the hose off. You probably don't need to, but again, I might do it anyway. That way I can just set this thing completely out of my way. And then this thing, the reason it's going to come off easily is because, well, kind of easily, yeah. It's not been too long ago that I actually removed it when I was doing all the coolant lines. So there's your reservoir, pops right off. And now you can see in here to the alternator a little bit better. You've got a wing nut right here and a bolt here. Loosen this bolt, then we're going to crank this wing nut. It's going to loosen the alternator enough to where you can pull the belt off. So I'm going to put a 12 mil on there and loosen this guy. Okay, so I've got that loosened all the way. Got it. Alright, so you got to work the belt off, which is off. You can't see it, but on the bottom, just around the corner down there, there is a bolt. So underneath here, underneath the edge, it's probably going to be out of focus, but there's a bolt under there that holds the alternator in place underneath. Hopefully this shows up on here. I can't see it either. And that underneath, I think, is a 14. It is a 14, and I've got it loosened up. I'm gonna go ahead and take this bolt off. Pull it out of the way. Okay, so in order to get the bracket out of the way, I have to loosen that bolt over there on the far end of the bracket. You don't take it out, you just loosen it. Yeah, it's a 14 as well. That work. So loosening that, you see what this does? Allows you to get the bracket out of the way. Back behind here, there is a connector for electrical. You have to undo that little bolt that's holding the alternator harness on, and I believe there's going to be one on the bottom side too. Alright folks, so the bolt that holds the wiring harness on is a 10. Got it, got it, got it. Out. 2 hands. Alright, there you go. 10 mil. That bolt holds the upper part of the wiring harness on the alternator. Okay, so we're going to go underneath the van. 14. So if I keep that there, gotcha. There's my bolts. There it is. All right, so got the long bolt out. You do have a nut on the back side, so you're going to kind of have to squirrel around to get those two things out. This is the wiring harness. Oh, it just clips. All right, so 1 part clips, 1 part bolts, and then I have to be able to pull it out, which might be impossible. I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to do this the way that I know it's correct to do. I'm going to take a few minutes and I'm going to actually pull this all apart, because all it's doing is leading to more frustration and I don't like it. Look at this. Huh. Wonder what this is. Dad Jim. Is that the alternator? What in the world? Alright, so now let's take a run to Asheville and have Tony open this thing up and see what needs to be done. Got back from the alternator shop and I now have retrieved my wonderfully refreshed alternator. When I first took it in, it sounded like this.
Yeah, that's a bearing.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, because it's not even charging yet.
So it's really awesome. Got to take it to a professional who knew what he was looking at, what he was listening to. And he looked at the charging. The alternator was working perfectly fine as far as the charge. So he replaced the bearing and got it back today, and it sounded like this.
How's that sound?
Wow. Quiet as a mouse.
Right. That's it charging.
So as far as the alternator goes itself, the alternator is in good shape, huh? Wow. So now I'm back. I'm going to put this together and go ahead and reinstall it. Hopefully everything will go back together as it should. One thing I'm noticing down in here is that the one bracket bolt that holds this into the engine block, I unscrewed it a little bit too far, and it has drained out a little bit of coolant from that area of the engine. So when you undo that, you really just need to loosen that bolt enough to where you can drop the bracket out of the way or pull it out of the way. All right, so I've pulled the alternator in a position where I can plug in the wiring harness. It's only going to plug in one way. Snap. So you can see what I'm doing. I've already attached the rear part of the wiring harness and then the nut that connects this connector as well. That's a 10 mil to tighten that guy up. Next thing I'm going to do is get this back in position so I can feed that bolt through there. I'm going to wiggle this thing until it hits. There it goes. Is that all the way through? Yep. Sweet. Next thing I have to do is get this bolt back in position. That's the part that went like that. This swings up. I've got to tighten up this bolt back here. This is the one that's been leaking the transmission fluid. It is 14. Okay. There's that one, that one. Then I can tighten this down a little bit. Okay, and then tighten this up a little more. There it goes. Okay. Okay. So awesome. Wow. It wasn't that horrific, but it was a constant roar. That's nice. Yes. Thank you, Tony. Thanks for fixing my alternator. Absolutely wonderful. All right. The noise is gone. Hope you guys are having as much success working on your TVs. Guys and gals out there enjoying your vans, let's continue to share the information because it sure is helpful. I'll see you on the next one. There's going to be more work as time goes on. Have a great night.